Have you ever wondered why a single glance can ripple through the solid walls of his self-assurance, leaving fissures of doubt in its wake? In the hush of her presence, there lies a secret cadence, 7 subtle murmurings of her inner sovereignty that gnaw at the very roots of his inflated pride. These whispers are not spoken aloud. They travel through the uncharted corridors of his psyche, inviting his shadow to rise in trembling recognition of a power he never knew he feared. In the soft geometry of her posture, he senses an unspoken command in her stillness, an unshakable resolve. She moves as though guided by an inner governor, each breath marking a boundary he cannot cross. To the outside world, she may appear demure, a silhouette framed by gentle curves and quiet grace. Yet within her lies the alchemy of transformation, the union of light and shadow, the sovereign marriage of acceptance and will. He catches flickers of this when her eyes stray to distant horizons, as though she communes with unseen guides drawing strength from invisible wells. She does not chase his approval. Instead, she cultivates her reflection in her own gaze. Her laughter, low and resonant, echoes in his mind, long after the sound has faded from the room, reminding him that happiness need not be tethered to his validation. When she smiles at a memory only she can see, he wonders what secret gratitude she holds, what inner altar she tends in devotion to her own becoming. In that moment, his mind reaches for an excuse. Perhaps she is merely amused, perhaps distracted. Yet he cannot soothe the jolt of insignificance that pulses beneath his skin. At the threshold of her voice, he feels the stirrings of his unrefined self. When she speaks, it is with measured clarity, words woven from the loom of her values, each syllable an affirmation of boundaries. She names her needs without apology or hesitation, embodying the principle that her time, her heart, her body are her own sovereign domains. In witnessing this, he feels the old scripts of entitlement unravel. His insistence to commandeer her attention recoils against the fortress of her autonomy. And in that recoil, he confronts the hollow echo of his own unresolved hungers. In the silent ritual of her ritual morning light brushing her skin as she greets herself in the mirror, he senses an initiation. She tends the garden of her psyche with reverence. Affirmations whispered like mantras, shadows given space to speak wounds, attended as sacred bookmarks in the story of her emergence. He watches this homage to self, and recoils, for it reveals his neglect of his own unseen wounds. The echo of her compassion for herself becomes an indictment of his careless disregard for his own inner child. When she steps into a room, she carries no banner of conquest. Instead, she radiates an energy that cannot be claimed. It is a quiet magnetism born of integrity, a resonance that vibrates in harmony with her truth. He feels the pull of this resonance, and he cannot help but notice how his bravado crumbles in the face of something so simple, so unyieldingly genuine. It unsettles him to realize that her strength is not a fortress built against him, but a cathedral open to her own unfolding, an invitation he cannot pretend to ignore. She allows the ebb and flow of life to wash over her without losing her footing. When storms rage inside or out, she stands anchored in her values, her spirit, a mast that bends rather than breaks. He witnesses her calm amid chaos and senses the tremors of envy stirring within. At once, he admires her resilience and laments his own brittle defenses. Her capacity to weather discomfort without coercion or complaint reveals the poverty of his reactions, which are often frantic negotiations for comfort at the expense of his dignity. Finally, in the twilight of his awareness, he recognizes the 7th whisper, the haunting refrain of self-possession. She needs no audience. Her applause is self-conferred. This revelation shatters the final illusion that her power was ever his to grant. It echoes in the hollow chambers of his ego, stirring a reckoning he can neither evade nor fully understand. In that moment, he realizes that her power was never about him. It was always about her birthright to inhabit her own valiant story. In these 7 whispers, stillness, self-reflection, laughter, unbound, boundary language, self-ritual, authentic presence, and self-possession, he encounters a mirror that refuses to flatter. And as he gazes, he must ask himself, will he retreat into the safety of his accustomed scripts, or will he answer the call to excavate his own buried sovereignty? She carries the weight of her own story like a sacred vessel, each memory a gemstone polished by time and introspection. In the quiet aftermath of their first encounter, he finds himself retracing her steps in his mind, seeking the invisible map she follows. There is no roadmap, but there is rhythm, the cadence of her breathing, the spaces between her words, the pause she grants before unveiling her next thought. In those pregnant silences, she claims the right to think, to feel, to exist without interruption. He searches for a way to fill the void, to commandeer her silence with his own voice, but the space resists him. It is an altar dedicated to her self-possession, and he is only a visitor. When she glances at him obliquely, he senses an undercurrent, a recognition that he is not the center of her universe. She holds her gaze lightly, as though honoring the concept of reciprocity. She sees him, but she does not belong to him. In that fleeting exchange, he catches the trembling edge of his ego as it battles the notion of equality. He wonders if this is indifference, misreading her gracious distance for disregard. But in reality, she is offering him a gift, the freedom to stand beside her, rather than trying to shadow her light. Her laughter is a language he cannot decode. It rises from the depths of her being, unforced, unbothered by his presence. When he tries to mimic its warmth, he finds only an echo tinged with desperation. She laughs at things he cannot see, a memory tucked away in her private archives, a dream she once dared not speak aloud. In this unseen theatre, she is both actor and audience, and his attempts to join the performance feel intrusive, like a spotlight in the wrong moment. He realizes that her joy is self-contained, a reservoir he cannot tap into by command. Sometimes she retreats into solitude, not as punishment, but as pilgrimage. She walks along paths that wind through the forests of her unconscious, listening for the voices of her inner guides. He imagines her treading ancient stones in moonlit groves, communing with the archetypes that dwell beyond the perimeter of the ordinary mind. In these journeys, she collects fragments of her raw essence, shards of intuition, echoes of ancestral wisdom, tremors of the primordial feminine. When she returns, there is a luminosity around her eyes, as though she carries moons in her gaze. He feels the tempests of his own unacknowledged instincts rise in challenge. How dare she wander alone, while he remains tethered to his familiar routines? She speaks of her boundaries not as walls, but as lighthouses, beacons that guide her back to herself. When she articulates her needs, it is with the precision of a seasoned cartographer mapping uncharted terrain. Her no is not a door slammed shut with anger, but a gate softly swinging on well-oiled hinges. It invites respect rather than submission. He tests these boundaries, nudging at them as though they were suggestions rather than imperatives. Each time they stand firm, and each time he feels the sting of rejection deepen his awareness of her sovereignty. In his discomfort, there lies an invitation to learn that his worth does not hinge on breaking through her barriers. In the half-light of dawn, she performs her daily rites. She sets intentions with the hushed solemnity of a priestess, acknowledging her wounds as portals to her power. She offers gratitude for each scar, recognizing them as signatures of her survival. When he watches this sacred choreography, he feels both reverence and unease. He sees his own reluctance to honor pain, his compulsion to gloss over grief in favor of false cheer. Her courage to sit with discomfort, to let it guide her toward growth, unsettles him more profoundly than any confrontation. In her embrace of suffering, he confronts the brittleness of his own defense mechanisms. Her presence in a crowded room is akin to a solitary candle flickering amidst a forest of torches. She does not compete for brightness, she simply exists, and in that simple act, she commands attention. Others gravitate toward her warmth, drawn by an authenticity that transcends fashion or flirtation. He notes how effortless it seems, yet he knows it is the fruit of countless inner nights spent excavating fear. In her authenticity, he perceives the echo of his own contrived personas. The masks he wears to shield himself from vulnerability feel suddenly heavier, oppressive. He wonders if he too could dare to remove them. When conflict arises, she does not shrink. She faces discord with the calm conviction of a warrior who trusts her own compass. She speaks truth with the precision of a sculptor carving stone, removing only what is unnecessary, yet never diminishing the integrity of the whole. He has known many confrontations, all of them battles of words where one side must win and the other lose. But with her, there is no scoreboard, no tally of victories. Her aim is resolution, not conquest. In witnessing this, he recognizes the violence of his own approach, the tendency to weaponize words in defense of a fragile ego. He feels the tremor of shame, and within it, the seed of possibility. As her power unfolds, he stands at a crossroads. The first part of their dance revealed the whispers that haunt him. Now the call grows louder. He may turn away, retreating into the comfort of the known, or he may lean into the invitation to dismantle his own illusions. The choice lies not in her hands, but within his own labyrinthine mind. In the wake of her unwavering light, his own silhouette quivers at the edges, as though he is a painting struck by a sudden draught, the pigments of his pride shifting beneath the frame. He notices the tremor in his chest when she crosses a room, not the flutter of lust, but the tremor of recognition. She reflects a version of himself he has long neglected. In her fierce self-possession, he sees the specter of his own abandoned potential, and it both captivates and terrifies him. He begins to sense a rhythm beyond his habitual beat, a silent pulse that she alone seems attuned to. In moments of quiet exchange, when conversation wanes and the world falls away, he finds himself listening not for her words, but for the cadence of her breath, the rise and fall of her inner tide. It whispers truths he has buried, that his worth resides not in performance or conquest, but in the simple act of being fully himself. Yet to claim this would demand a reckoning that his ego resists, for it requires dismantling the citadels he built to defend against disappointment, failure, and shame. When he tries to mirror her calm amid chaos, he discovers that his reflection is a fractured echo. In heated arguments where once he would sharpen his tongue like a blade, now he hesitates, disarmed by the memory of her sculpted words, words that sought resolution rather than domination. The contrast between his reactive storm and her poised stillness becomes impossible to ignore. He feels pulled between the comfort of his old ways, which promised safety through control, and the unknown terrain of vulnerability where growth awaits, but the path is unmarked. Late at night, when the world outside has folded into silence, he confronts the remnants of his past that she has unwittingly unearthed. He recalls the hollow victories of his youth moments when he proved his worth through competition, when approval was a currency he chased like an addict. Now, in the hush, her laughter echoes against those memories, reminding him that true currency is measured in authenticity, not accolade. He feels both gratitude and grief, gratitude for the unearthing grief, for the years spent pursuing illusions. In the tenderness of her gaze, he catches glimpses of an inner sanctum he longs to enter, but fears he cannot navigate. It is a place where shadows coalesce into meaning, where wounds are not hidden, but honored as maps to deeper truth. She invites him with subtle gestures to follow her through this threshold, to walk alongside her as both seeker and witness. Yet each step into her territory feels like stepping onto sacred ground, and he hesitates, aware of his past transgressions, times when he ignored boundaries, when he projected his insecurities onto others, when he mistook silence for weakness. She does not chastise him for his past. Rather, she offers a mirror unmarred by judgment, reflecting back the man he could become if he chose to traverse his own inner wilderness. In this mirror, he sees a version of himself who greets fear with curiosity, who embraces discomfort as a catalyst for growth. It is a vision both luminous and unsettling, for he must acknowledge the scaffolding of stories he has told himself to justify his defense mechanisms. The edifice begins to crumble as he contemplates living from a place of radical honesty. He thinks of the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius writing by candlelight, Seneca scribbling lessons on the virtue of resilience, knowing that their wisdom speaks to this precise moment. He senses that the invitation she extends is aligned with those teachings to observe his reactions without clinging to accept what is outside his control, and to focus on the sovereignty of his own mind. Yet her example surpasses Stoic theory. She embodies it in flesh and bone, teaching him by demonstration. In her silence, she offers the purest form of instruction. In the space between them, a new dynamic unfolds, not one of hunter and prey, but of two sovereign beings learning to dance in tandem. He tests this new choreography, offering vulnerability where he once wielded ego. He admits his mistakes when he crosses a boundary, owns his fears when anxiety tightens his throat, and approaches conflict with the intention to understand rather than to triumph. In response, she meets him with compassion, tempered by clarity, guiding him back when he wanders into old patterns. Their interactions take on a different resonance. A simple disagreement no longer feels like a clash of wills, but like two currents converging in the sea, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but always moving toward a deeper equilibrium. He notices his heartbeat steadying as he learns to listen, not only to her, but to the quiet counsel within himself. Her presence becomes a catalyst, sparking a fire of introspection that illuminates paths he never dared to traverse alone. Yet the process is neither linear nor swift. There are moments when his ego thrashes, yearning to reclaim its authority, when he recoils from discomfort and retreats into defensiveness. In these moments, she offers space without withdrawal, a steadfast reminder that power need not be exerted, nor love withheld to compel change. It is this alchemy of patience and presence that teaches him the highest form of attraction, not the allure of dominance, but the magnetism of mutual growth. Bit by bit, he feels his fear dissolve into curiosity. He approaches his own shadow, as she has taught him, with reverence rather than aversion. He traces the outlines of his wounds, names the stories they tell, and thanks them for their service. In doing so, he reclaims aspects of himself he once denied, and with each reclamation, the whispers of her power echo in harmony with his own newfound voice. And he realizes now that these 7 whispers were never intended to haunt him with guilt, but to beckon him toward his own sovereignty. The haunting is but the echo of what is possible, a life lived in full consciousness, where 2 sovereign souls do not diminish each other, but magnify the radiance of shared awakening. He begins to recognize that her power is not some distant myth, but a living force that pulses through every moment they share. In the hush of twilight, he notices the way her silhouette softens against the fading light, an unspoken reminder that strength is not always loud, nor is it bound by rigid postures. There, in the gentle slope of her shoulder and the curve of her neck, he perceives the fullness of her being, paradoxical, everything and nothing all at once. He feels compelled to mirror her stillness, to ground himself in the present, rather than in the anxieties that once drove him to plan and perform. Their conversations evolve beyond the surface tangles of daily life. She invites him into the undercurrent of her dreams, recounting visions that dance on the edge between waking and sleep. He listens enraptured by the imagery staircases dissolving into mist mirrors, singing with voices only she can hear, forests that root themselves inside her heart. In these disclosures, she hands him a lantern to explore the shadowlands of his own imagination. He hesitates, then takes it, illuminating fears he had buried beneath bravado, the fear of not belonging, the fear of being unlovable, the fear of drowning in his own vulnerabilities. And in naming them aloud, he feels the first liberation of speaking into the shadows. She does not rush him through these revelations. Instead, she honors every falter, every tremor of his voice. When tears come unbidden, She does not look away in discomfort. She meets his gaze with the soft steadiness of a guide who has walked this terrain herself. He realizes that her empathy is born not of sentimentality, but of a fierce solidarity with the wounded self. It is as though she tends a communal flame, inviting all who approach to cast aside armor and feel the warmth that rises when we stand naked before our own truth. In turn, he begins to notice how her power ripples beyond their intimate exchanges. He sees colleagues pause when she enters a meeting, not out of fear, but in recognition of someone who carries a deeper authority, one that emanates from integrity rather than title. He observes strangers in cafes catch her eye, their expression shifting from polite curiosity to genuine acknowledgement before she even speaks. And he understands that her influence is a testament to authenticity. When one stands firmly in their own light, the world cannot help but reflect it back. He experiments with this in his own life. He stops calibrating his words to please others, choosing instead to speak with brutal honesty, tempered by kindness. He declines invitations that would stretch him too thin, prioritizing practices that nourish his inner resource. Meditation, journaling, solitary walks at dawn. Like ripples in a pond, these changes reverberate outward. Friendships deepen work. Projects gain clarity, and he feels a newfound alignment between his actions and his values. In this, he recognizes that the power she modeled is not confined to gender or relationship. It is a human inheritance awaiting reclamation. Yet the path is not devoid of resistance. He encounters moments when the old voices rise in defiance, whispering that such surrender is weakness, that vulnerability invites exploitation. In these crises, he recalls her 7 whispers, the cadence of her breath, the echo of her laughter, the firmness of her no. He recalls the tension he once felt at each turn, and he answers those old voices with questions instead of rebuttals. What if strength lies in openness? What if true courage is the willingness to feel, not to armor? What if power flows from softness rather than from control? Each question chips away at his skepticism. He allows himself to step into uncertain terrain, and he finds that much like her, he can bend rather than break. When a collaborative meeting escalates into conflict, he offers perspective instead of retort, and the storm dissolves into constructive dialogue. When an opportunity arises that would pull him away from his inner work, he pauses, feeling the subtle tug of misalignment, and chooses instead to honor the still point within. He feels the hum of his own sovereignty awakening, harmonizing with the cadence she has long embodied. In these moments, he sees their journey not as a conquest, but as a mutual unfolding. She has haunted his ego with 7 whispers. He now returns the gesture, haunting her space with his own emergence. He sits beside her in silent solidarity, each of them a testament to the possibility of transformation. And in that shared silence, something profound takes root, the knowledge that power is not a finite resource to be seized, but a wellspring that grows when tended with respect for oneself and for another. He senses the horizon of the narrative shifting, an invitation to step into the final act of this dance. There remains one step yet to take the moment of parting, and Gui lie when 2 sovereign souls, having haunted each other's shadows, must decide whether to rise together or to walk alone toward the dawn. In the hush before dawn, their silhouettes stand against the pale promise of morning light, 2 figures poised at the edge of transformation. He feels her breath carry with it the residue of dreams she dared to speak aloud, dreams woven from the tapestry of her Jungian exploration. In this lingering quiet, he senses that the final whisper is close at hand, an echo that will seal their shared journey, or send them each towards separate horizons. She turns to him with eyes that reflect both invitation and farewell. There is no need for words. The tension between staying and letting go pulses like a drumbeat in their veins. He recognizes that to remain tethered to what was would be to resist the very alchemy she has unleashed within him, and yet to step forward without her beside him feels like venturing into uncharted waters without a chart. In that moment, he understands the true measure of her feminine power, the capacity to cultivate autonomy without severing connection, to illuminate paths, without dictating direction. Her sovereignty does not demand his allegiance. It extends an offer of partnership, a mutual commitment to growth. He reaches out tentatively, at first tracing the line of her jaw, as though mapping the contours of this profound revelation. His touch is not possessive, but reverent, a recognition that in this final act he must choose whether to hold on or release. She does not sway under his hand. Instead, she leans into the contact, allowing vulnerability to become their shared terrain. In this fusion of strength and softness, he feels the culmination of all that has come before, the stillness that invited reflection, the laughter that taught self-containment, the boundaries that honored mutual respect, the rituals that sanctified inner work, the authenticity that magnetized others, the resilience that weathered storms. And now the last whisper emerges, not to haunt, but to herald detachment. Detachment, she shows him, is not withdrawal, but freedom, the space from which genuine love and collaboration arise. It is the choice to value oneself without needing to extract worth from another's admiration. It is the serenity of knowing that love is an offering, not a transaction. When he breathes into this truth, he feels the weight of his ego retract like ripples receding from a stone dropped into still water. In place of those ripples, a void opens vast, luminous, inviting. He steps back, releasing his grip, as though letting her soul breathe, and in that very release, he discovers a profound relief, the knowledge that they are both complete beings, standing side by side without clinging. His heart, once laced with apprehension, now pulses with calm resolve. He realizes that true intimacy flourishes not in dependency, but in the union of two sovereign spirits who choose one another each moment anew. She smiles a gentle curve that carries both gratitude and quiet victory. No words pass between them, for none are needed. In the cathedral of their shared silence, the echoes of 7 whispers converge into a single chord, the radiance of self-sovereignty magnified in mutual resonance. As the sun's first rays kiss the horizon, they turn toward the journey ahead, together in purpose, yet undiminished in autonomy. The world beyond their threshold awaits full of challenges and awakenings, and in this new dawn, they carry with them the lessons etched by those 7 whispers, the power of presence, the magic of self-reflection, the liberation of laughter, the strength of boundaries, the sanctity of ritual, the allure of authenticity, and the grace of detachment. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.